Hello, you're watching movie snapshot scenes, and this is the summary of The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Shadows over Gondor. The final battle for Middle-earth draws near. As darkness spreads, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum continue their treacherous path toward Mordor. The burden of the ring weighs heavily on Frodo, clouding his mind. Gollum whispers deceit, poisoning his thoughts against Sam. The journey is nearing its most dangerous moment. Meanwhile, in Isengard, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Gandalf reunite with Merry and Pippin after the destruction of Saruman's stronghold. The once mighty wizard is now powerless, trapped in his own tower. Wormtongue, in a final act of betrayal, slays Saruman, ending his dark influence. With Isengard fallen, Gandalf turns his gaze toward Gondor, where war is imminent. Minas Tirith, the last great stronghold of men, must be warned. Leaving the others behind, Gandalf rides with Pippin toward the White City. As they arrive, Denethor, the steward of Gondor, grieves for his fallen son, Boromir. Blinded by sorrow and pride, he refuses to call for aid. Pippin, feeling indebted to Boromir's sacrifice, pledges his service to Denethor. Yet he sees the madness growing in the steward's eyes. Gondor stands alone, while Sauron's forces gather in the east. Far away, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli journey toward Rohan, where King Theoden rallies his riders. But time is running out. Sauron has sent his armies to crush Gondor before help can arrive. As night falls, the beacons of Gondor are lit, a desperate call for aid. The flames blaze across the mountains, reaching Rohan. Aragorn rushes to Theoden's side. Gondor calls for aid, he says. The king does not hesitate, and Rohan will answer. In the shadows, Gollum's treachery unfolds. He convinces Frodo that Sam wants the ring for himself. Broken and confused, Frodo orders Sam to leave and continues alone, following Gollum into the darkness of Cirith Ungol. Unseen, a monstrous horror stirs within the tunnel ahead. Shelob awaits. The war has begun, and the fate of Middle-earth is hanging by a thread. As war looms over Gondor, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli face a choice that could determine the fate of Middle-earth. Though King Theoden has mustered the Rohirrim to ride to Minas Tirith, Aragorn knows that Rohan's strength alone will not be enough. A greater force is needed. One night, Aragorn is awakened by the arrival of Elrond, who brings him a powerful relic, Andúril, the reforged sword of Isildur. The time has come for Aragorn to embrace his destiny as the rightful king of Gondor. Elrond speaks of a forgotten army, the dead men of Dunharrow, cursed spirits bound to the mountain for betraying Gondor long ago. Only the heir of Isildur can summon them. Determined, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli leave the Rohirrim behind and take the perilous road into the paths of the dead. As they enter the haunted mountain, a ghostly whisper fills the air, and shadows stir. The army of the dead surrounds them, skeletal warriors moving like mist through the darkness. Their king steps forward, his hollow eyes fixed on Aragorn. "Who enters my domain?" With unwavering resolve, Aragorn raises Andúril. "I summon you to fulfill your oath. Fight for me, and I will release you." The spirits waver, laughing in eerie defiance. But then, something shifts. They see the blade reforged, the proof of Aragorn's lineage. The time of their curse is ending. Meanwhile, in Minas Tirith, Gandalf prepares for the battle ahead. The skies darken as Sauron's armies approach, a monstrous force of orcs, trolls, and siege weapons led by the fearsome Witch King of Angmar. Yet inside the city, hope is nearly lost. Denethor, driven mad with grief, refuses to fight. Far away, Frodo walks blindly into Gollum's trap. Deep inside Cirith Ungol, he finds himself surrounded by sticky webs and the stench of decay. Suddenly, a shadow looms above him. Shelob, the monstrous spider, strikes as Frodo gasps in terror. The war for Middle-earth is about to begin. The storm of war has arrived. Minas Tirith, the great white city of Gondor, stands against the might of Sauron's army. From the walls, Gandalf and Pippin watch in horror as the enemy approaches, a sea of orcs, trolls, and siege towers stretching as far as the eye can see. The city is outnumbered, and Denethor, the steward of Gondor, has fallen into madness. Inside his halls, Denethor sits in despair, convinced that Gondor is doomed. Blinded by grief over his fallen son Boromir, he ignores his surviving son, Faramir, who has returned wounded from battle. Instead of preparing for war, Denethor orders a funeral pyre, planning to burn both himself and Faramir alive. Pippin rushes to find Gandalf, knowing only he can stop this madness. Outside the gates, the battle begins. Siege weapons hurl massive stones at the city walls, shaking the very foundations of Minas Tirith. The Witch King of Angmar, Sauron's most feared servant, leads the attack. With dark sorcery, he commands a massive battering ram, Grond, the hammer of the underworld, to break through the main gate. Gandalf rides forth, his white staff shining in the darkness, rallying the men to stand firm. But the enemy is relentless. Minas Tirith's defenses crumble, and the orcs flood into the city, bringing death and destruction. Just as all hope seems lost, a distant horn echoes across the battlefield. The riders of Rohan have arrived. At dawn, King Theoden leads his army onto the Pelennor Fields, thousands of Rohirrim warriors riding with him. With a mighty charge, they crash into the orc legions, turning the tide of battle. Theoden fights with fury, cutting down countless foes. But high above, a dark shadow descends, the Witch King, riding his fell beast. He strikes down Theoden, mortally wounding him. As the king falls, a lone warrior stands to face the darkness. Eowyn, the shield maiden of Rohan. With fire in her eyes, she prepares to fight the Witch King, unaware that she is about to fulfill a prophecy long foretold. The battle rages on the Pelennor Fields, a clash of steel and fury. King Theoden lies wounded, his strength fading. Above him, the Witch King of Angmar, the most feared servant of Sauron, looms upon his fell beast. No man can kill him, for a prophecy has foretold his invincibility. But standing in his way is Eowyn, disguised as a Rohirrim soldier. As the Witch King laughs, she stands firm, shielding the fallen king. "You fool! No man can kill me," he hisses, but Eowyn removes her helmet, revealing her true face. "I am no man." With a mighty cry, she drives her sword into the Witch King's face, piercing through his cursed form. His monstrous shriek echoes across the battlefield as his body collapses into nothingness. The prophecy is fulfilled. The Witch King is no more. Nearby, Merry watches in awe, but victory is bittersweet. Theoden, his body broken, whispers his final words to Eowyn. "I go to my fathers, in whose mighty company I shall not now be ashamed." With that, the King of Rohan breathes his last, and Eowyn weeps. Meanwhile, in Minas Tirith, Gandalf races against time. Denethor, driven mad by despair, prepares to burn himself and his unconscious son, Faramir, alive. As the flames rise, Gandalf and Pippin burst into the tomb, saving Faramir just in time. In his final madness, Denethor sets himself ablaze and leaps from the walls of Minas Tirith, perishing in fire. But even as the forces of Gondor and Rohan fight bravely, the battle is not yet won. A new darkness approaches. From the river, black ships appear, flying the banners of the corsairs of Umbar, Sauron's reinforcements. The defenders brace for a new wave of enemies, but as the ships draw closer, a new banner is raised. The white Tree of Gondor. Aragorn has arrived. With him are Legolas, Gimli, and the army of the dead, spirits bound to his will. They sweep across the battlefield like a storm, overwhelming Sauron's forces. The enemy is crushed, and the battle is won. As the dust settles, the city stands, but the true war is not yet over. Frodo and Sam still walk the fires of Mordor, carrying the fate of Middle-earth on their shoulders. As the great battle is won in Gondor, Frodo and Sam continue their perilous climb toward Mount Doom. The land of Mordor is a wasteland of fire and shadow, and every step drains what little strength they have left. The burden of the ring is almost unbearable, and Frodo's mind is slipping away, consumed by its dark power. Gollum follows them, lurking in the shadows. His obsession with the ring has driven him mad, and he watches, waiting for his moment to strike. The journey grows harder as they cross the barren plains of Gorgoroth, the fiery mountain looming in the distance. Their food is gone, and even water is scarce. Sam, ever loyal, carries Frodo when he can no longer walk. "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you," he cries, lifting his friend onto his shoulders. Meanwhile, back in Gondor, Aragorn knows that Frodo will never reach Mount Doom if Sauron's eye is upon him. He makes a daring decision to march on the Black Gate itself, to draw Sauron's attention away from his true enemy. With an army of men from Rohan and Gondor, Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and the remaining warriors ride to the very doorstep of Mordor. They stand before the massive gates, outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Sauron sends his vast armies to meet them, but Aragorn does not waver. Drawing Andúril, he turns to his men for Frodo. Back in Mordor, Frodo and Sam finally reach Mount Doom. The fiery chasm is before them, the only place where the ring can be destroyed. But as Frodo stands over the edge, something terrible happens. He hesitates. The ring's power has fully consumed him. Turning to Sam, he declares that the ring is his, slipping it onto his finger and vanishing from sight. But Gollum will not be denied his precious. With a sudden attack, he lunges at Frodo, biting his finger clean off. The ring is his once more, but his triumph is short-lived. In his madness, Gollum stumbles and falls into the fire, clutching the ring as it melts into the flames. The Dark Lord's fate is sealed. Sauron's power is undone. As Gollum falls into the fires of Mount Doom, clutching the ring, the great burden is finally lifted. The One Ring melts into the molten lava, its dark power unraveling in an instant. Far away, at the Black Gate, Aragorn and his companions witness a sudden change. Sauron's tower begins to tremble, and the Dark Lord's gaze turns to his greatest fear. His ring is gone. A scream of rage and terror echoes across the land as his form collapses into nothingness. Without their master, the armies of Mordor are thrown into chaos. The ground shakes violently as Mount Doom erupts, spewing fire and ash into the sky. The Black Gate crumbles, and Sauron's creatures, orcs, trolls, and ringwraiths, are consumed by the destruction. Victory has been won. But inside Mount Doom, Frodo and Sam are trapped. The volcano's fury rages around them, and there is no escape. Exhausted, they collapse on a rock as molten fire engulfs the mountain. Frodo, finally free of the ring's torment, looks to Sam. "It's over, Sam." As the fires grow closer, Sam speaks softly. "I'm glad to be with you, Mr. Frodo, here at the end of all things." But it is not the end. At the last moment, Gandalf arrives with the great eagles. Frodo and Sam are lifted into the sky, carried away from the burning mountain. Days later, Frodo awakens in a soft bed in Minas Tirith. Sunlight streams through the windows. He turns to see Gandalf smiling. One by one, his friends appear. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and finally Sam. The war is over, and peace has returned. In a grand ceremony, Aragorn is crowned King of Gondor. The people cheer as he walks through the city, but he stops before a small group of hobbits. As they bow before him, he smiles and says, "My friends, you bow to no one." Then, in honor of their bravery, the entire kingdom bows before the hobbits. At last, the hobbits return home to the Shire, where life is simple and peaceful. But Frodo is forever changed. The wounds of his journey do not heal. With Gandalf, Bilbo, and the last of the elves, he sails into the west, leaving Middle-earth behind. Sam returns to the Shire, where his family awaits him. As he steps through his door, he breathes deeply and smiles. Well, I'm back. The adventure has ended. The world is saved, and the Age of Men has begun.